Yeah, like I want to like not in the, like because we got to start class like a certain way, but like I want to go to like some sort of seminar thing where I'm like one of the guest speakers out of multi and just literally just started like straight out of Enoch with a sucker named Lamech. Like, yeah. I want like all outdated like hip hop styles, but I'm like the DJ has to have like the Terminator X like cataract sunglasses on. Like that dude, that was the hardest band that ever existed, and the guy in the back stole sunglasses from his grandma after her eye surgery. It was- Thank you. Straight out of no. Amen. So if we don't know what we're doing, when we go through the Bible has multiple examples of stories we would consider crazy, and then multiple examples of passages that if you really aren't a student of the word, you would consider kind of boring in comparison. What we're going to do today is, since we're reading the Bible in order, we're going to get two of the craziest stories in the Bible and the first legitimate boring passage out of the way all in one shot. Because the Bible really had a good thing going. I mean, we had like the creation of a world out of nothing. You know, we have talking snakes, rebellion, homicide. Then all of a sudden the Bible's just like, yeah, let's pump the brakes on all that and get weird and boring at the same time. And the thing is that it's not boring and it's really not all that weird. It's what we do with it. The traditions of man. Oh, God. I mean, what man has passed down as biblical interpretation is just borderline insane sometimes, and no more so than with the third little thing we're going to hit, which is the beginning of Genesis 6. We're going to be at the end of Genesis 4, all through Genesis 5, and into the beginning of Genesis 6. And what I want you to do as you're turning there is, you know, kind of get in the mentality of, like I said last week and the week before, Yoda had it right. You must unlearn what you have learned. But the reason is going to become clear why I'm reading this weird little story at the end of Genesis 4, and I saved it. You know, I didn't just finish the chapter last week. So Cain obviously leaves the general vicinity of the garden, meaning he leaves the general vicinity of being in right relationship with God and goes elsewhere. And he gets married. He founds a city. He starts having a family of his own. And down his family tree, we get to meet this guy, Lamech, who is one of the citizens of the city of Enoch. And in the 23rd verse, it says, Lamech said to his wives. Now, most of your Bibles will probably have this like indented. Here's why. This is actually a song. In the original language, this is actually in the structure of what we would consider a song. In English, it's not a very good song. Actually, in the original language, it's not a very good song either. But he had an agenda. So it says, Lamech said to his wives, Ada and Zillah, hear my voice. You wives of Lamech, listen to what I say. I have killed a man for wounding me, a young man for striking me. If Cain's revenge is sevenfold, then Lamech's is 77-fold. I mean, first and foremost, let's just get the elephant in the room out of the way. What the heck is this family history that like it gets passed down to him that like Cain was like exacting revenge on his brother? His brother was just doing the right thing and minding his own business and got killed. But by the time he gets to like the grandkids, he's just like, no, he was getting his revenge. You know, like I don't against who? I don't know. Mom, dad. I mean, we all have mom and dad issues here in the mission, right? But secondly, I mean, like the Bible, like we're not even to the 5th chapter, and we got a dude who's literally dropping bars about like killing people for disrespecting him to his multiple wives. I mean, people like I love when people are like, the Bible's just really outdated, man. Heck no. No, this is the founding of Def Jam Records right here. And I mean, listen, if Suge Knight had been alive, he'd be signing this guy. Like he'd be running in with a contract. Yeah. And you could tell the wives were probably like getting up and dancing. Like, yeah, it was craziness. But the reason that story is where it is and why I'm sharing it will become clear after we get through Genesis 5. So Genesis 5 is a genealogy. If you don't really know how to study the Bible, genealogies are the part you probably skip over. Genealogies are absolutely ridiculously cool, and a lot of them say a lot of very different things. If you're familiar at all with the context of the book of Hosea, Hosea is one of the prophets, and God told him to keep taking back his wife, who was just an unrepentant adulteress, just endlessly sleeping with other men. And God kept saying, no, go get her and bring her home and forgive her. And, the whole thing was a picture of how God is constantly going after his adulterous wife, which is us, and bringing us back. But there's a mini genealogy in Hosea that is absolutely vicious if you know how to read it correctly, because there's this moment where Hosea is sitting at the dinner table with their 3 kids, and she's nowhere to be found one more time. And he starts naming the kids, but like in the original language, when you're reading what these names mean, I mean, it goes from basically like stranger in my house to the last one is not my child, and I mean, but that's the thing about how much strain we are putting on the relationship with God, because there is a breaking point in our unfaithfulness. I mean, I've said this multiple times, and some of you have heard variants of this. God's mercy is unlimited for a limited time. Like, seek me while I am able to be found. There will come a day where, they will search for me and not find me. And so, it's unlimited, but for a limited time. And we don't want to end up kind of falling out into the not my child category. So these genealogies have a lot to unpack sometimes. And this one is fun. And here's why, is because most people who are new to the Bible will read this and find it so absolutely unbelievable that they will go no further, and that is the end of their Bible experience. We talk a lot in this class about how the Bible uses very alliterative language sometimes. It exaggerates, and that doesn't mean it is saying untruths. The way that histories were written at the time that the Bible was compiled are very different than how we consider a history right now. Like history in the year 2025, everything has to be fact-checked, bibliographies, multiple sources. But listen, when we mythologize our historical figures, we're not lying about them. We're talking about their character far more than we're talking about the exact details. And I'm not going back to the Bible to say this. Jess and I were talking on the way down here. In American history, we mythologize our own historical figures, and that wasn't all that long ago. So fun, here's the exercise. Every one of us is familiar with the name Paul Revere. Here's the thing about Paul Revere. The only thing you know about Paul Revere is actually not true. Paul Revere did not ride a horse to death from one end of like the country to the other, somehow outpacing the entire British Army. Like, listen, that was his intent. That tells you a lot about what he was wanting to accomplish. That tells you a lot about his character. dude didn't even make it out of the state. Like, and that doesn't mean it's a lie. It means this is the way that story was being told was we want you to understand who this guy was. So some of the examples that we always talk about, because I always want to be transparent about weird stuff you might find on your own in your own alone time with the Bible. You know, the gospel opens up with how all of Jerusalem, all of Jerusalem came out to John to be baptized. Like Herod did not come out and get baptized by John. The Roman soldiers did not come out and get baptized by John. If John had baptized even all of the faithful Jews in Jerusalem, why did Jesus even have to bother? But what the Bible's trying to do with that language is like, a lot. Here's my favorite one, because I know Robert has done the math. Jesus comes along, and we have two options with the way he teaches this. Jesus is either saying, when you forgive 70 times 7, meaning don't bother to do the math, or meaning do the exact math. And then when you get down to like 3 to go, just get ready. Just get ready to put a beating on that. No, what he's saying is don't keep track. That's it, 4-9. And at 489, Robert's like, Jesus gave me the all clear. Vengeance is mine, says the Lord. At 490. No, what he's saying is, don't keep track. I mean, how many times, and we talk about this one a lot, how many times in what we call the Old Testament, in the Tanakh, the Hebrew Scriptures, is there some variation about how, and Israel on that day annihilated all of their enemies, and they were all dead. They were all gone. Their name was blotted out of history. One verse later, the following summer, they returned. Basically what they just want you to know, dude, they put a beating on them. They clearly didn't wipe them out. I mean, how many times did every worshiper of Baal have to die? Over and over. And Baal was wiped out entirely from Israel. Then you get to the next chapter, and it was like the biggest threat facing the children of Israel, Baal worship. They're just wanting you to know the victory was pretty substantial. The amount of people John baptized, pretty substantial. The amount of times you're supposed to forgive, it's pretty substantial. So when you get hit with Genesis 5, and it's completely, I'm going to be honest, unbelievable lifespans for these people, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to go to a contemporary source to let you know the way history was written. At the same exact time that these passages were being written down, there were other cultures and other societies writing histories. One of the most famous that survives is the Sumerian king list. These were all the kings who ruled in Sumeria according to their history. I'm going to read this to you, and please try to take this very seriously. After the kingship descended from heaven, the kingship was in Iridug, and Iridug, Elulim, became king. He ruled for 28,800 years. Eleazar ruled for 36,000 years. Two kings, they ruled for 64,800 years. Then Iridug fell, and the kingship was taken to Bad Tibira. In Bad Tibira, Enmula'ana ruled for 43,200 years. He ruled for 28,800 years. Then Dumazid, the shepherd, ruled for 36,000 years. Three kings, they ruled for a total of 108,000 years. This isn't even their lifespan. This is just how long they ruled. Now, there is nobody that lived in Sumeria who was reading this going, yes, I was there. No, most of these people had a lifespan, like, you know that back then, like, if you made it to 40, you were going on ancient. Right? Like, life was hard. So you have a whole bunch of people who are like 40 and they're already like great-great-grandparents and they're tired, right? And they're like hearing this. They're like, I remember when that guy was king. It was horrible. Thank God. He was on the throne for maybe like 11 years tops before like somebody put an arrow through his neck. Right? But this isn't lying. This was the way that histories were written back then was to inform you it was just a long reign and a lot was accomplished, right? So when we get to Genesis 5, there are a lot of opponents of the Bible who will look at this and just be like, this is completely unbelievable. And listen, to our modern sensibility, it's completely unbelievable. And so one way to attack this before we read it is the way that histories, even contemporary to this, were written. They're not lying. They are just using very alliterative language to let you know, man, these people lived a long time. The second thing to bring in mind is this. We are living in a Roman calendar. I mean, seriously, raise your hand if you really believe we are only in the 2025th year of, like, life. We're not. But we're in the year 2025 because Rome was like, you know what? We're the center of the world. The calendar ought to start when we say it. Here's the funny thing is Rome had existed even before they put their calendar in place. But like, if you understand things like Jewish New Year and Chinese New Year, none of them fall at the same time as our New Year. Because like even today, there are multiple calendars that are still running that are in very different years than 2025. And so we have really consigned ourselves mentally when we read things about other cultures, ancient histories, to a 365-day cycle with leap year because the calendar is broken. And we don't comprehend what kind of a timetable these people might have been working on. To them, a year might have been a season. So when we read, somebody living like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, it seems impossible to us, but we really don't know what kind of a calendar they were on as one approach to this. And secondly, we already know from contemporary sources that the way that history was written was just use really big numbers to say a lot or a long time. But then when we get to Genesis 6, you're also going to find out that these people really might have just lived this long because compared to the Sumerian kings, this really isn't long at all. But they also, weren't eating chemicals and food dye and preservatives and breathing in toxins and drinking poisoned lead water. They weren't living in, Michigan where the water lights on fire. So there's a really good chance they just lived longer because they were healthier. But so keep all that in your pocket when I start reading this completely unreasonable genealogy. This is the book of the generations of Adam. When God created man, as in Adam, man, because that's where that word generates from, man. And that doesn't mean male, it means mankind, humanity. Because again, male and female, he created them both. He made him in the likeness of God. Male and female, he created them. And he blessed them and named them man when they were created. They, meaning male and female. So just keep that clear. When Adam had lived 130 years, he fathered a son in his own likeness, after his own image, and named him Seth. Seth means destined. And the reason why they would have named him that, again, is they had two boys, and one is dead and the other is dead to them. So if the family is going to carry on, this is the kid. This is the destined one. This is the one that is meant to actually get the family going in the direction it's meant to go. The days of Adam after he fathered Seth were 800 years, and he had other sons and daughters. Thus, all the days that Adam lived were 930 years, and he died. That seems unreasonable to us. That seems completely reasonable to the Sumerians. The Sumerians are like lightweight. When Seth had lived 105 years, he fathered Enosh. This guy's name it literally is the word for mortality, so it would be mortal. A good translation would be frail, but what it generally means is to die. That is the exact word, to die. And what you're going to find out, what this genealogy is doing at its core is getting us from the garden to the flood. Right? And you guys, even if you've never read the Bible, you know those two stories and what they signify. So to get from the garden to the flood is to get from right relationship with God to things are so bad that we are just drowning in the world that we built for ourselves. I mean, that's the Bible's wording for it, which we'll get into next week. So what you're going to see is there are a couple names that are kind of hokey, but for the most part, as the world gets darker, like these people start basically naming their kids stuff like I should have never brought you into this world. Right? I mean, like that's kind of like what's happening, like really at its deepest, like fundamental level is you're seeing the further people are getting away from right relationship with God, the closer they are getting to the flood. And so people are getting further and further away from right relationship. But this is also a generational thing. And we'll talk about this a lot in a couple of minutes. But like some of you guys are raised in a family where maybe your parents weren't the most faithful believers, but grandma used to be like a heavy hitter in the church. Right? And she raised her kids to know better, but her kids were kind of like, you know what, we just want to sleep in on Sunday and let our kids make their own decisions. And then we were raised to need mission teams. Right? Like that, I mean, that's only 3 generations of like tight relationship with God to kind of like, yeah, I think my family really used to be into this religion stuff, but like meth. You know what I mean? And listen, there is nothing new under the sun. That is pretty much what this story is really laying out for us, is the further each generation gets away from the garden, the further each generation is getting away from even having belief in what that garden represented. So the world is just falling because each new generation is being raised to just believe less and less and have less and less of the values that you would have if you were living within proximity of that garden. And so people are really getting bleak with this. When Enosh had lived 90 years, he fathered Kenan. Enosh lived after he fathered Kenan 815 years and had other sons and daughters. I was going to break this, but I'm going to actually kind of hit you guys with a cliff notes. Some of these names I'll tell you, and some of the names I'll tell you what they mean at the end. When Kenan had lived 70 years, he fathered Mahalalel. This one is real easy if you have ever been in prison or the hood. Anytime you have ever come into contact with Islamic culture, you have come into contact with the root words here. See, the one at the end, El, is easy. It's the word for God, right? I mean, as in Yisrael, Noel, Emmanuel. That El, the word in the middle, that's the one we would pick up if we have ever spent time in a high Islamic community, Hallel. It's the word for blessed. Their food, it's not kosher, it's halal. It's halal meats. That means blessed. And Ma is simply the. So his name is the blessed God. This is a person who named his kid, and you can tell he's really grateful. Things were probably starting to look bad, and he has a child, and he's like, we're going to dedicate this child to God. So his name literally translates to the blessed God. Right? When Mahalalel had lived 65 years, he fathered Jared. Jared means shall descend. Why he named him that, I have no idea, but it works for where we're going with this. Verse 18, when Jared had lived 160 years, he fathered Enoch. Enoch means exhorting. An easier way to translate that is teaching. So maybe he taught his parents a very valuable lesson. Maybe childbirth was really, really hard and they learned something from it, but he named him exhorting. When Enoch had lived 65 years, he fathered Methuselah. This is the one. Methuselah lived longer than anybody else in the Bible, but I got really, really good news for any of you who are doubting. He didn't live even like 1/8 of a Sumerian king. So we can deal with Methuselah's ridiculous lifespan. For as long as this man lived, his name literally translates, his death shall bring. Why? I don't know. Maybe they were thinking he was going to have, he was probably born sickly, and then instead he lived longer than everybody. Right? When Methuselah had lived 187 years, he fathered Lamech. Lamech is a great one. Lamech means the despairing. Right? Now you can tell things are getting bleak. I mean, Methuselah lived a really long time, so he probably saw some stuff as the world was getting worse and worse and worse. And he has a kid, and he basically just made, you know what? The kid is goth. I mean, he just names his son the despairing, and then we get to Noah. Lamech actually wasn't the despairing. He had some hope. It says, when Lamech had lived 182 years, he fathered a son and called his name Noah, saying, out of the ground that the Lord has cursed, this one shall bring us relief. And here's so Noah's name means relief or rest. And I mean, that's a beautiful thing for someone whose name literally translates the despairing, who's looking at the world saying, you know what, God has cursed this. This world is fallen at this point. My generation is probably, we should be considering ourselves the last. Things are this bad. But you know what? This one, my son is going to bring us rest. He's going to bring us relief. And so, if you read this as only the names in the original language, it's magnificent. Genesis 5, only the names. Man, as in mankind, is destined, mortal, frail to die, but the blessed God shall descend, teaching, his death shall bring the despairing rest. It is the entire gospel of Jesus Christ in a genealogy. It is the entire gospel of Jesus Christ, his descent, even the teaching, his death, bringing relief to the lost, to the hopeless, to the despairing. And all of that is only a precursor to the craziest story in the entire Bible, which is Genesis chapter 6, the first paragraph, the Nephilim. In the hands of mortal men who consider themselves theologians, this story has been turned into a nightmare. It is, listen, I've heard every possible teaching on this, and the most prominent, and you've probably heard this. Angels come down from heaven. They find early versions of women, you know, the ones that are in glass cases at the Natural History Museum where you're like, oh. But these pure heavenly beings, perfection personified, come down and see Cro-Magnon women, and they're like, I want to get with that. And it says they impregnate them somehow as if the stuff is compatible, and the women give birth to giant mutant monster babies, and God is like, I know what the angels did here, but these people make me sick. None of this works. Listen, I'm not going to tell you that every single time you read the Bible that your goal should be looking for practical application for your own life. The main goal should be learning the character of God with practical application coming. Gun to my head, I could never give you any sort of application whatsoever for angels impregnating us and us giving birth to giant mutant monster children, and then God being mad at us for it somehow. So for starters, I'm going to annihilate that teaching using the Word of God, because that's the best way to make any sort of a case for the Word of God. So Jesus gets asked, when we are in heaven, if a man was married and divorced, when we're in heaven, is he married to his current wife or his former wife? Right? Jesus gets asked this. To which Jesus replies, when you are in the world to come, you will be like the angels that are not married and are not given in marriage, because they are not capable of being given in marriage. I don't know if any of you, and some of you guys who've been in this class long enough, you know we talk about this a lot. The reason why every single time an angel appears to people, the very first thing the angel has to do is yell, no, come back, wait, fear not, is because the angels do not look like Ken dolls with feathery wings. They look like something out of Dungeons and Dragons. They are covered with multiple eyes, and yes, they've got wings. They've got wings on their back. They've got wings coming out of their head. They've got wings coming out of their upside down head. They've got wings coming out of their chest. They've got wings coming out of their legs. There are eyes everywhere. They are terrifying. This is why, seriously, they appear to shepherds with good news, and they're like, do not be afraid. Every single time an angel appears, if they look the way that, the Renaissance painters made them look, we'd be like, this is the greatest day of my life. Instead, the people in the Bible are falling on their faces, crawling fetal positions, screaming, running. Forget whether or not a heavenly being would see our ancient ancestors as jacked as we used to be and be like, yeah, that's all right. There's no way our ancient ancestors would see that and be like, this could work. And more importantly, we've got it out of Jesus' mouth. These things are incapable of marriage. So what we're going to do is we're going to do something the Bible really has a big heart for. We're going to perform a resurrection. But the resurrection we're going to perform is on this passage, because it has been beaten to death and treated horribly for over 2,000 years. I'm going to tell you why that philosophy was brought into being. At some point, about 200 years before Jesus walked the earth, people started coming up with reasons how man could have become this corrupt if we were made in the image of God. And so what somebody did with good intentions was they went to this passage of Genesis and they turned it into the origin story for how man was introduced to wicked behavior. These beings came and they taught us warfare. Now, here's why I emphasize the end of Genesis 4 before we get here. This dude is not only clearly a homicidal maniac, he's writing raps about it before Genesis 6. We didn't need help at all to have a criminal mindset. Like nobody had to come from heaven and teach us corruption. But I understand why in those early days they were like, we've got to come up with some philosophical justification for how we fell so far. Here's how. It's built into our DNA. It's a feature, not a bug, because if we're meant to choose to follow God, that means it's got to be in us to choose to not. And he wants us to choose. He didn't want automatons. He doesn't want robots. He wants a loving relationship. And listen, nothing creates a loving relationship more. I can't think of a better wording than, he will love much who is forgiven much. And so now we're going to read what Genesis 6 actually says. When man began to multiply on the face of the land, that's Genesis 5, and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of man were attractive, and they took as their wives any they chose. I have no idea how much they paid their local rabbi to perform that ceremony, if it's what we said it is. Then the Lord said, listen to this. So think about this. In the wrong hands, angels come down from heaven. They see the daughters of man and they're like, she looks good. They marry any that they choose. So it's causing a disruption. Don't take my word for it. Look at God's reaction. Then the Lord said, my spirit shall not abide in man forever, for he is flesh. his days shall be 120 years. What kind of a statement is this on the character of God, that the beings that ought to know better come down, create a mess, and God is like, you know who I'm really upset with? The people. I mean, seriously, stop and think about that for like 2 seconds. Heavenly beings supposedly come down from heaven, impregnate women, and God is like, I blame the victim. This is not a real good introduction to the justice of God if this is the way we're meant to interpret this. But here's where this chapter and this passage, this is why we have all the problems we have. Because your Bible translates words all the time into English, and then sometimes it just randomly doesn't. This is one of those cases, and we get hit with a word that is so heavy sounding. Like, what even is this? It says, the Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came into the daughters of man, and they bore children to them. These were the mighty men who were of old, the men of renown. We read the word Nephilim, and other people read the word Nephilim. That is a great sounding name for like a Norwegian death metal band. And also for our imaginations to run wild. See, when we get hit with a name like this, you end up with a version of the movie Noah that is so accurate it ends up on the Sci-Fi Channel. So do the mental math on that, right? Because that's what we get in Noah. These women somehow gave birth to giant rock monster things. Who nursed those kids? Because mom certainly didn't live. And did they have a normal umbilical cord? Like, I need answers. Or I just need to rethink what the Bible is actually telling us. So I'll start with, real easy translation. There's only one way to translate it. Here's what the Nephilim translates to. It does not translate to the monsters. It does not translate to the giants. It translates to the fallen ones. That's it. And the fallen ones don't sound like conquerors. They sound like people who fall. And what are they? They are the children, which means they are the fruit, which means they are the outcome. The outcome of relationships between what the Bible describes as the sons of God and the daughters of man getting into a relationship with each other. And what comes out of those relationships are fallen ones, fallen people, people who fall. So the Bible in no translation says the sons of God are angels. It says they are the sons of God. I don't know if you've ever put any thought into who the sons of God are, but I've got great news for you. I'm looking at us. And so the Bible in this, it doesn't leave us hanging. Like, we don't have to do like any sort of extraneous work here. It tells us this is literally the problem from the garden to the flood. That's how this passage opens, telling us as the generations passed and man started to fill the earth, people were growing further and further and further away from right standing with God. In those days, the sons of God saw that the daughters of the world were attractive. That's the only, I love it. It doesn't say, we've got a couple things in common. No, I like the way they look. And so they got into relationships with the daughters of the world, and the outcome are people who fall. So I'm going to bring this home. It's real simple stuff. In the New Testament, we are hit with a real similar passage, and it goes like this. Do not be unequally yoked with non-believers. Now, if you don't know what a yoke is, it seems really outdated. Like, most of you, a yoke is like hanging with all the other trash on the wall in Cracker Barrel because nobody uses them anymore. But like that little like parable that is being used, that would have not only spoken to the agriculturally minded people of the time that heard it. You go to a poorer area in a farming community in Kentucky, and they will still know exactly what that passage means. Because what a yoke is when you don't have a tractor, and you don't have heavy equipment, and John Deere doesn't exist yet, and even if it does, you don't live in an area where you can afford it. You put a harness around the neck of an animal, and that animal will pull. And if that animal has the right strength and is aimed in the right direction, it will cut your labor not even in half. It'll cut it down to like an eighth. Instead of you being out there with like a hoe or a shovel, I mean, you get your field plowed in like seriously, like 800% better timing. That is what a yoke would do. You would put this device around an animal's neck, and you would attach it to a plow and let that thing do all the work. And what Paul is saying when he says, do not be unequally yoked with non-believers, is because somebody figured out, you know what gets the job done even quicker? Getting one with 2 neck holes and putting 2 strong animals in it, will be done by noon. And what Paul was saying is, do not lock yourself at the neck with somebody who is not pulling in the same direction, with the same goal, who's got the same source of strength that you have. Because listen, I would love to tell you that like godliness is that contagious, but if I came down here and it was a rainstorm outside, and on my way in, I fell in the garden, and I come in here, and one of you had just gotten out of the shower. If we hugged, your soap and water isn't going to rub off on me. My filth is going to get all over you. Listen, this is why missionary dating does not work. Do you know what missionary dating is? My love will save them. Yeah, good luck with that. We'll see you when you come back to the mission. And we send them to another mission. You know how many times people fall for this? Like, I know they don't believe in Jesus, but if they love me, they'll go to church. Yeah, like the first 2 Sundays you're together. Then after that, nobody goes to church. It's over. When we chain ourselves in a relationship, and this doesn't have to just be romantic, business partnerships, you name it, with somebody who is not pulling in the same direction, with the same calling, with the same goal, going in the same direction that we are meant to be going. And listen, we might be able to drag them along for a couple steps, but at some point we are going to start going in circles. We are going to go backwards. We are going to go down. Because our strength is barely enough to keep us moving forward. And so, do not be unequally yoked with non-believers is the exact same message as when sons of God choose to get in relationships with children of the world. And I mean, the Bible does not pull its punches. It doesn't, like, they weren't coming up with like weird excuses like, listen, we don't both believe in God the same way, but we have all these other things in common. No, it was like they looked good. That's it. When sons of God, when daughters of God get into a relationship with sons and daughters of the world, what comes out of those relationships is people falling. Because some of you know this bitterly, what it's like to be raised by one believer and one doubter. And while mom is doing everything she can to get your behind motivated to go to church on Sunday, dad is laying in bed going, I don't even know why you believe in this stuff. Which parent do you think the kid wants to stay with? And at some point, our generational religion has absolutely just been watered down, because some of you guys, man, you've got grandparents, great-grandparents. Man, the family Bible was out on the table every single time you went in the house. They were the first people to show up at church. They volunteered for everything. The pew literally had their butt indent eroded into it. Like, I mean, these people were fixtures in the church. And they tried to raise their kids in the faith. But you know what? The world was just a little more attractive than the word. And then they raised kids who didn't believe at all. And then those kids, they raised some of us. Because when children of God get into a relationship with children of the world, what's going to come out of it is not wholesale conversions. It's going to be people falling. That is what is born out of these relationships. Not giant rock mutant monster children that somehow didn't rip mom in half and then somehow made God angry at us, with angels that the Bible, one, doesn't even say it's angels, and two, Jesus tells us they can't be married, yet this story tells us they got married. This is a real simple story, and it's one most of us are the victims of. Listen, I will never be able to apply the Sci-Fi Channel version of this to my life. What the Bible actually says, it's how I ended up in here. Because we didn't need somebody to come down from heaven and then teach us how to be a fallen race. A chapter and a half before, we've got this nutcase spitting hot fire. And he's the great-grandson of the world's first homicidal maniac. And we can learn a lot about their family by the fact that that story gets passed down. Pop Cain was just getting his revenge. On who? I don't know. They obviously didn't have access to the story we were able to read. I mean, like, their family history was wild. We didn't need help. We didn't need some extraterrestrial species to come from the heavenly places to teach us how to mess things up. We're already outside of the garden by the time this all happens. We're already in the wrong place, in wrong standing with God, which is why it just takes generation after generation after generation to move further and further away from the garden, which means further and further and further away from what it looks like to be in right relationship with God. But the good news about both of those little stories is buried in the middle is a genealogy that when we read it in the original language, man, the hope is right there. Yeah, humanity is destined to be mortal, frail, to die. But the blessed God shall come down teaching, and his death shall bring the despairing their rest. And Jesus is right in the middle of all of this madness. The way he's right in the middle of all of our madness, but it's up to each and every one of us to push forward. In the immortal words of reggae legend Jacob Miller, forward ever, backward never. And in doing so, man, make sure that we are not being unequally yoked with people who are not pulling in the same direction, who do not have the same calling, who do not have the same source of strength, who are not drinking from the same wells that we are called to drink from. Because that takes all of us further away from the garden and all of us closer to the flood. Because that is what this story is leading up to. The flood. And spoiler alert, man, again, unlearn what you think you've learned. God does not just like go up into heaven and go, they all make me sick, I regret this, and just dump a bucket of water on us from heaven. The Bible's really clear. It says the flood comes up out of the world, and God's exact wording is, I will let the world they have built for themselves be their undoing. We're drowning in our own mess. But thank God he's also got a remedy for that too, and we'll get into that next week, so don't leave and get into unequally yoked relationships with other people in the house. And don't run home to your unequally yoked. Just stay. Stay. Because every single time we you know what, the world looks a little bit better right now, that's one of my favorite parts of the Noah story, which we'll get into next week. Don't spend your time in here looking out the window daydreaming about weren't things better? No, they're why we needed the free Jesus cult. No, things are not better. So I wonder what my friends are doing. They're drowning. The world is a flood. And thank God we were called onto the ark. Man, we cannot be tempted by how attractive the world looks. Like it or not, you have been bought with a price. You are now children of God. That means the children of the world, they've got nothing for us except drowning and falling. Sit still, stay put, stay the course, forward ever, backward never. Do not get unequally yoked. Stay children of God, closer to the garden, not closer to the flood. And we will pick this up next week, same bat time, same bat channel, unless God has mercy on me and I die. Praise out.